With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Here in Algiers, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has presided over the ceremony for the second edition of the Prize of the President of the Republic for the Best Exporter under the theme Commitment, Achievements and Prospects. The participants in an international conference on the African dimension of the Algerian Revolution have adopted the vision of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, in favor of joint African action to prevent and resolve conflicts on the African continent. Thousands of demonstrators have gathered around the U.S. Congress in Washington to protest against the visits to the U.S. of murderer Benjamin Netanyahu and the ongoing barbaric Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Smani. Here in Algiers, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has presided over the ceremony for the second edition of the Prize of the President of the Republic for the Best Exporter under the theme Commitment, Achievements and Prospects. The ceremony, held at the Abdel Al International Conference Centre, was attended by senior state officials, members of the government and representatives of professionals associations, as well as heads of public and private companies. The President said that he was delighted to attend the second edition of the Best Exporter Award, which this year comes in the context of the Independence Day celebrations. He added that it was an opportunity to remember the sacrifices of the martyrs and to follow the path of loyalty and promote the gains of our country in various fields. The President recalled that the bet to gradually eliminate forms of economic dependence, especially with regard to our food security, remains one of the top priorities. Shortly before the ceremony, the President of the Republic visited the exhibition dedicated to leading companies in the export sector with encouraging export figures. Representing the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, War Veterans Minister Mr. Laïd Darbiga is attending the funeral of the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam in Hanoi, Nguyen Phu Trong. The minister met the Vietnamese President, Mr. Tu Lam, to whom he delivered a message of condolence from the President of the Republic and conveyed to him his brotherly greetings and his feelings of compassion and solidarity with the Vietnamese people in this painful ordeal. Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arabawi has chaired a government meeting devoted to monitoring the implementation of the guidelines issued by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, on digital transformation and to examining presentations relating to the energy, hydraulics, justice and sports sectors. As you followed in our top stories, participants in an international conference on the African dimension of the Algerian Revolution, which ended yesterday in Algiers, have adopted the vision of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, in favor of joint African action to prevent and resolve conflicts on our continent in order to achieve integration and economic development in accordance with the principle of African solutions to African problems. In their recommendations, the participants expressed their deep esteem for the President of the Republic for his interest in the issues of the African continent and his assiduous efforts to strengthen African unity. The details in this report.
The participants hailed Algeria's role as a source of inspiration for African peoples in the context of the approach favoring joint African action and African solutions to African problems, in line with the forward-looking vision of the President of the Republic, who always insists on crystallizing African solutions within a purely African framework and advocates in all regional and international fora in favor of security, peace and sustainable development for the Africa of tomorrow. The recommendations also stress the need to continue to support all just causes and oppressed peoples throughout the world, the right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital, and the inalienable and imprescriptible right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. The participants also recommended strengthening the historical ties between African countries through programs and projects designed to help safeguard our common heritage and raise the awareness of new generations. They also recommended opening a Department of African Studies at the National Center for Studies and Research on Popular Resistance, the national movement of the 1st November 1954 revolution, in order to strengthen cooperation between African countries in terms of studies and analyses on issues of common African memory. The participants also recommended the creation of a historical encyclopedia to strengthen collective memory, calling for this seminar to be turned into an intergenerational African memory forum to be held periodically in African countries, and for the creation of an African historical database containing manuscripts, works, and other historical studies. The participants also recommended twinning Algerian and African cities with a view to promoting ties of friendship between the two parties. Finally, the participants recommended that the proceedings of this seminar be disseminated through various media.
The chairman of the Independent National Election Authority, Ani Mohamed Sharfi, has supervised the transfer of candidacy declaration files for the presidential election on the 7th of September to the headquarters of the Constitutional Court. In a statement to the press, Mohamed Sharfi said that the Ani has ruled on the applications submitted by 16 candidates for the next presidential election who were informed of the decisions taken to enable those whose candidatures were accepted to prepare for the electoral campaign and those whose applications were rejected to lodge an appeal with the Constitutional Court within the legal deadlines.
The authority has taken organizational measures to facilitate the work of the Constitutional Court in processing the files submitted to it. The transfer of files and individual signature forms from any headquarters to the Constitutional Court is carried out in accordance with the legal provisions, with the convoy being secured by the various security forces and state services. The processing of candidacy declaration files and individual signature subscription forms submitted by the candidates was carried out with the utmost transparency and professionally within the legal deadlines.
The president of ANI also underlined that the transfer of candidacy nomination papers and individual signatures forms to the Constitutional Court's headquarters marks the completion of a stage in the electoral process. Algeria has reaffirmed through its permanent representative to the United Nations office in Geneva and to the international organizations in Switzerland, Rachid Bledhen, said that the universal ratification of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is the essential guarantee for the elimination of nuclear weapons. In his speech during the open debate of the Second Preparatory Committee for the 11th Review Conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty 2026, Rachid Bledhen underlined the Algerian delegation's support for the data put forward on behalf of the Non-Aligned Movement Group, the African Group, and the Arab Group.
Algeria has a record of positive contributions in the field of disarmament, reflecting its continued commitment to strengthening international peace and security, as well as its unwavering conviction that nuclear disarmament is at the heart of its priorities and that it is committed to achieving the main objective of the treaty, namely the complete eradication of nuclear weapons, which pose the greatest threat to humanity and to the environment, reiterating its commitment to the implementation of the treaty, which is a cornerstone of non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament and a key element for collective security. Algeria stresses the importance of achieving universal ratification and of ensuring that countries, in particular those possessing nuclear weapons, fulfill their nuclear disarmament commitments.
Bledhan said that the establishment of a zone free of nuclear weapons was more important than ever following Israel's threats in 2023.
Algeria has consistently contributed within its geographical area to the establishment of the African Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone, being one of the first African states to ratify the Treaty of Pelindaba. The Algerian delegation expresses its concern at the obstacles which prevented and continue to prevent the implementation of the 1995 resolution on the establishment of a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. The establishment of this zone has become more important than ever, especially after the statements and serious threats by an Israeli official in November 2023 about the use of nuclear weapons against Palestinian civilians.
Now to the Western Sahara file. Algerian political parties and organizations have reiterated at the close of the summer university for the executives of the Polisario Front and the Sahrawi state, hosted by the Ahmed Bougara University in Boumerdès, their total and unconditional support for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. The president of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Brahim Ghali, has stressed the need for the UN to speed up the implementation of its commitment to complete the decolonization of Western Sahara by imposing the implementation of its charter and its relevant resolutions on the question, and by speeding up the process enabling the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara to complete this process. The details with Said Bouazi.
During the closing ceremony of the 12th Summer University for the executives of the Polisario Front and the Sahrawi state held in the province of Boumerdès, the Sahrawi president called on the UN to speed up the process to enable MINURSO to complete its mission of organizing the referendum on self-determination for the Sahrawi people in accordance with the 1991 UN OAU settlement plan, the only agreement accepted and signed by the two parties to the conflict, the Polisario Front and the Kingdom of Morocco, and unanimously adopted by the UN Security Council. At continental level, President Ghali called on the African Union to impose the strict implementation of the principles and objectives of the Constitutive Act of the AU, notably respect for the borders inherited at independence. The European Union is also called upon to refrain from signing any agreement with the Moroccan occupation state, which includes the territory's airspace or territorial waters of Western Sahara, especially as it is a blatant violation of international law, international humanitarian law, and European law, which also constitutes a direct participation in the assassination, displacement, repression, blockade, and plundering of natural resources suffered by the Sahrawi people. Reiterating the legal responsibility of the Spanish state towards the Sahrawi cause, Brahim Ghali affirmed that the latter was imprescriptible and could not be buried by the head of the government's support for the Moroccan expansionist plan. He pointed out in this respect that the Sahrawi state wished to see a French position wiser and more coherent with international legality with regard to the conflict between Western Sahara and Morocco. He then referred to the sovereign decision of the Sahrawi people to resume the armed struggle in response to Morocco's violation of the ceasefire in order to counter by all means the maneuvers of the occupying state, which continues to flout the resolutions of international legality.
The representative of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, has said that the results of the discussions between Palestinian factions in the Chinese capital Beijing are the culmination of efforts made in Algeria, which gave rise to the Algiers Declaration on which these talks are based. Commenting on the agreement of the Palestinian factions in China to unite their efforts in the face of the Zionist aggression and to put an end to the genocide being carried out by the occupying entity and its settlers, the Hamas representative said in a statement to the press that the Beijing state is based on the efforts of the Palestinian factions in Algeria and their conclusions. In this case, the Algiers Declaration, which sanctioned the proceedings of the Conference for the Unification of Palestinian Ranks held from 12 to 13 October 2022. Thousands of demonstrators have gathered around the U.S. Congress in Washington to protest against the ongoing barbaric Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people, calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The crowd holding Palestinian flags gathered around the Capitol in the center of the U.S. Capitol. With slogans like Free Palestine, they shouted their anger at the visit to the United States of murderer Netanyahu, against whom the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has requested an arrest warrant for his war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.